Hello and good evening. This is Terry Allen, and this is The Radical Progressive. It is September 12th, 2020. We just got through yesterday of the anniversary, well, the 19th year anniversary of 9/11 attacks. And you don't hear much about anything about the truth of that, the situation that that created. It was truly a new Pearl Harbor, just as it was planned. And you can see how everything has turned out since then. The military-industrial complex has made trillions of dollars. The 1% in the banks have made trillions of dollars. Our government, Congress and Senate, they've made millions of dollars. Everybody's profiting off of this situation. Oil companies. And who is the people that end up getting screwed is our military, which is young men and women, mostly volunteers, well, all volunteers. So it's a sad situation, but I'll go into that later. The subject of this is what's the difference between Biden and Trump? Because in my opinion, there is no difference. What I'm really sick of getting is these emails from Tom Perez and Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and you name it. All of these hacks, these party hacks, Nancy Pelosi, and they're begging for money. Oh, Trump is a fascist. Oh, he's the most dangerous president we've ever seen. I even get emails from Bernie Sanders. And I was a Bernie Sanders supporter, actually, and a Tulsi Gabbard supporter. What angers me the most is that the Democratic Party, the DNC, stabbed Bernie Sanders in the back. They rigged the primary election, just like they did in 2016. They actually, Obama and Biden had lied to the FISA court with the FBI and had set up surveillance against Donald Trump's campaign, which was completely illegal. Now, first I got to say, I am not a Trump supporter, and I'm definitely not a Republican. I've been a Democrat all my life until 2016, when the DNC did what they did, a very undemocratic thing to do, actually, is they rigged the primary, and Hillary Clinton took over the DNC, and we were shoved, Hillary Clinton was shoved down our throats. She was probably one of the most disliked candidates since the United States was founded. I don't know, maybe that's not true, but every time she opened her mouth or gave a speech, her numbers went down in the polls. I remember there was a town hall meeting with one of the congressmen that was spouting platitudes about how wonderful Hillary Clinton was. And he made a statement that she's honest, and the entire audience just busted out laughing because nobody bought that. They knew she was corrupt because of the Clinton Foundation, the things that she was doing. The emails that got hacked were actually not hacked. They were downloaded onto a flash drive. Bill Binney proved that. And Seth Rich was the one that gave the flash drive to WikiLeaks, to Julian Assange. He was murdered 2 weeks later in Georgetown. So this whole thing is just, there's so much to talk about. But what I want to do is I need to just basically go through Biden's record. Because the record that we have on Trump is only about 4 years. And everybody's screaming about how he's a fascist, how he's dangerous, how, like Bernie Sanders, he's the most dangerous president in the history of Earth, and these kinds of things. I think George W. Bush was more dangerous because of the things that he did. And Obama was more dangerous for the things that he did, while Joe Biden was his VP. And I'll explain to you in a minute why. But first, let's talk about Bill Clinton. What we had Bill Clinton came in from coming down from George Herbert Walker Bush's administration, and he had a populist message. It's going to be for the working class, etc., all the same BS that we're hearing today, that we heard from Trump, actually the same BS. He gave us NAFTA, which wrecked our economy. It created the Rust Belt, actually. That's where the Rust Belt came from. People talk about the Rust Belt like, well, you know, it's a territory over here or something. The Rust Belt is called that because there are factories and warehouses all over that area in Pennsylvania and Ohio, Michigan, in that whole area where buildings are collapsing and rusting out. Those jobs are gone. And the reason they're gone is because NAFTA allowed our corporations to go down across the border into the maquiladoras, which was that border area between the United States and Mexico where Tijuana is. It allowed factories to close here in the United States and move down there where the wages, the average wage in Mexico at that time was 57 cents an hour. So this was sold to us as this wonderful trade agreement which was going to make everyone prosperous and bring back jobs and, you know, you name it. We had all kinds of gaslighting about it, all kinds of propaganda BS. Well, they knew that that was not true. They knew what that was, that treaty was to do, and it did exactly what it was designed to do, was to take labor here in the United States and lay labor off and move factories down there where they could get cheap labor, where the CEOs and the board of directors and the stockholders could make a fortune because they could cut back their labor rates, which were huge compared to the rest of a company's expenditures. So we laid off hundreds of thousands of good Americans with good paying jobs, with union jobs in manufacturing, and those jobs went away permanently. This was under Bill Clinton. And then what did they do? They passed the Welfare Reform Act, which cut welfare and food stamps. And the reason they did that was because all of these people that lost their good union, good paying jobs ended up going into the retail sector and into the service sector, which always pays minimum wage, or maybe a little more. So a lot of those people could no longer pay their bills. A lot of those people had to go bankrupt. A lot of those people lost their homes. A lot of those people couldn't survive without food stamps and welfare, so they had to cut food stamps and welfare. Now, this is a Democratic president, okay, with a Democratic Congress. So remember that. The Democrats screwed us back then. We know what the Republicans are. They are a corporatist elite. They are in the pocket of the 1%. And the huge corporations, they do their bidding, but we know who they are. We know the evil. They tell you right out front what they are for and what they are against. They're for huge tax cuts for the wealthy. You know, they're for cutting all the social programs. We know what they are. We know their policies. The problem is the Democrats are supposed to be for the working class, and they are giving us platitudes, and they are virtue signaling, gaslighting, trying to make people think that they can feel our pain and they know what's going on. Meanwhile, they are catering to the exact same 1% donors that the Republicans are. They're already talking about not worried about the working class because they're thinking that the liberals and the working class have nowhere else to go, so they're going to focus on getting the suburbanite, white-collar, upper middle class, you know, that part of the population. And that's their new strategy. You can thank Rahm Emanuel for that. his head is raised up again from the muck, and here he is giving advice to Joe Biden. Here's the situation. We had the Glass-Steagall Act then was canceled by Clinton, and that allowed the banks to recombine. The Glass-Steagall Act was actually put in place by Franklin Roosevelt. One of the first things they did to try and end the Great Depression and to prevent it from happening again, because at that time they knew what was going on. The Wall Street was committing fraud. They were doing insider trading. They were doing pump and dump. They were taking the assets of home loans and business loans, and they were gambling with them. Everybody was jumping into the stock market because it was a pyramid scheme. It was like the tulip bubble. It was a bubble, and they knew that it was going to crash. And so they wanted to do this again. They knew when they canceled Glass-Steagall that these banks could recombine again and do exactly what they did. They created a housing bubble, and they were giving people loans that didn't have jobs. They were giving people loans that were barely breathing. They knew that these loans were not performing. They were bundling them as AAA securities and selling them. They knew it was going to pop. But they didn't care because they knew that they were too big to fail and that the federal government would have to come in and bail them out. And that is called corporate welfare, corporate socialism. That's what it is. You can say anything you want about it, but that is the fact. And that's what it is. And as Martin Luther King said, we have got socialism for the wealthy and we have got rugged individualism for the poor and the middle class. And that is a fact. Then we got George W. Bush. This idiot, the guy that looks like the guy on the cover of Mad Magazine, what is it, Newman something or other. How people voted for this jerk, this idiot, just because, from the Bush dynasty. George Herbert Walker Bush, his father, Prescott Bush, was arrested in 1942 for funneling money from the Harriman Bank into the steel industry for the Nazis. Nothing happened. He was released. Nobody was sent to jail over this operation. American corporations were all over the Nazis. I digress a little bit, but the point is that W was a puppet. He couldn't find his ass from a hole in the ground. Cheney ran everything. Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz and Pearl and these neocons had taken over the administration, and they wanted to go into Iraq, and they were going to do anything they could. They even wrote a document back in 1999 to the president saying that we are the sole last superpower on earth, and we should take advantage of that situation by taking the Middle East, taking the oil, taking natural resources that we want, and if anybody fights against it, too bad. But they said that the American people will not buy it unless we have a new Pearl Harbor, which is what happened in World War II. The Americans were against getting into another war in Europe. We had already gone to World War I, and that was a complete nightmare, disaster. Now, here we come again with World War II. The Americans were sick of it. They didn't want to be in it. But we had a Pearl Harbor event, which was the Japanese attack in Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, which we knew was coming. Roosevelt knew it was coming. That's why all the ships were out in the ocean. We only had 2 or 3 ships in the bay there. He was not trying to get us into war, but he knew it was inevitable. So that's why they were keeping the ships out, because they knew something was going to happen, but they didn't know when, but they were trying to reduce or minimize casualties. So that was a new Pearl Harbor. You had thousands of Americans lining up to enlist in the Army. Same thing happened with 9/11. Even George W. Bush said this is our new Pearl Harbor, and we're going to go on a crusade. And the Islamic people know what a crusade means, because that's what the Christians did in the Middle Ages, is they went to the Holy Land and killed thousands of Muslims that were living in Jerusalem. And that's a whole other story, a whole other piece of history that probably most people don't know about. The situation is they lied to get us into Iraq. They knew that Iraq had not attacked us. 17 of the 19 hijackers were Saudis. Saudi Arabia is proven in court that Prince Bandar and his wife and others in the Saudi government were financing the terrorists and paying for their flight lessons and probably paying for their tips to the strip clubs. They knew exactly what was going on. You had people short selling United and American Airlines stocks. You had things going on that there was a lot of people that knew what was going on. There was a lot of people that knew what was coming down with 9/11, and they let it happen. There were people that had infiltrated Al-Qaeda. We knew what Al-Qaeda was. We had actually created Al-Qaeda. The United States created Al-Qaeda. We had taken a small Islamic fundamentalist, wacky group of people and funded them, gave them weapons and training to take on the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. That was the operation. This group was nothing. You had Osama bin Laden with this wacky group of misfits, and you had a situation where George Tenet, the head of the CIA, Colin Powell, they went to the UN and lied specifically to try and get a coalition of nations to go after Iraq and back us. We went into Iraq. There's 1 million dead from Iraq. We had the Baghdad Museum was looted of countless artifacts, incredibly unreplaceable artifacts from the Sumerians and the Babylonians. Gone. We were able to recover some of it, but not all of it. No telling how many archaeological sites have been destroyed. It was an abomination. Half of those dead Iraqis were innocent civilians, women and children. Ask the Red Cross. They will tell you. They have the numbers. So that's what you got from George Bush. Then you ended up with the Patriot Act. Then you ended up with the Wall Street bubble, that from the housing bubble, the crash. You had the bankruptcy bill, which was pushed and written by Joe Biden. The bankruptcy bill made it more difficult to go bankrupt. You couldn't go bankrupt. You couldn't get out of a student loan. It made it more difficult to get rid of your hospital debts, which when people would become ill, they had no health insurance, they would end up with a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 bill. Couldn't pay it in any form. Had to go bankrupt. They changed your bankruptcy used to be on your record for 7 years. Now it's for 10 years. You can thank Biden for that. Then here comes Obama with hope and change. Rhetoric and lies. That's what it was. It was a marketing campaign. It was not policy. Hope and change. Americans bought it. I even fell for it. I thought that a guy like this should understand what it's like for the middle class and the underprivileged, because he had been working in Chicago as an attorney for the social programs and for people that were unfortunate, that had financial problems. He was there as a social worker, basically. So he should have known. He did know but he was a puppet for Wall Street and the banks once again, and the military-industrial complex. Because what was the first thing they did? They bailed out the banks to almost $1 trillion initially. After that, the banks kept coming back for more money. Zero interest loans. We ended up spending trillions of dollars on the banks. We had, I don't know how many millions of people's homes were foreclosed on and people evicted from their apartments. The economy was wrecked again. I lost my home. I had to file bankruptcy because my business was destroyed because of what happened. Although I had accounts receivables, almost $250,000 worth of accounts receivables, couldn't collect. Now the printers were paying their bills. We had to file for bankruptcy. We ended up losing our house. Didn't get a penny from the government, not one penny, but you had huge corporations getting millions of dollars. The bankers were giving each other bonuses. They were having lavish parties. This was a corrupt from the core operation. It was a scam. It was a colossal shakedown of the taxpayers. And that was Obama and Biden that did that. That was that's on their hands. They turned the Iraq and Afghanistan war from 2 wars to 7. They completely destroyed Libya to get one man. Same thing with Iraq. You should see what they did to Mosul. That is Obama and Biden. That's why we ended up with Trump, because Obama and Biden's administration was so corrupt and so anti-Democratic Party philosophy and policy that people got sick of it and ended up going for a populist clown that was a talk show host, or not a talk show host, a reality show. People bought his rhetoric because he was telling the truth. Yes, the middle class is on its knees. We need health care for everyone. We need to get out of these wars. That's what he said. He said we're going to rein in Wall Street. We're going to bring back Glass-Steagall. He said all the things that we wanted. But what happened? He didn't do any of it. He put tariffs in place. That was a good thing. I'm for tariffs. The United States ran on tariffs for over 100 years. The way you implement it is not really the way it should work. He's not doing a very good job at it. But the other thing that you have that makes Obama and Biden and his staff, his cabinet, makes them war criminals is that you had the torture program, which was signed off by Nancy Pelosi, by the way. They knew that we were doing enhanced interrogation, which is a nice word for torture. And remember that speech that Obama gave where he said, well, we tortured some folks. We did a lot of good things, but we did a couple of bad things, and we tortured some folks. They should have hauled him off into prison right then. That is a war crime. But what did they do? They did nothing. And the reason is because Obama could have gone after George W. Bush and his administration for war crimes, and he said many times, I don't want to look backwards, I want to look forwards. And he said it over and over. And then he had Eric Holder, his attorney general, didn't go after a single banker. Same thing with Kamala Harris. She was supposed to go after Mnuchin because of the One West Bank crisis that happened when they were committing crimes, financial crimes. He should have gone to jail. He didn't. Kamala Harris is more interested in putting pot smokers in jail than she is bankers that commit fraud and destroy people's lives. So there's Harris for you. Same thing with Biden. We know what we are going to get with Biden. We know. We are not going to end the wars. He is not going to give us Medicare for all. He is not going to give us free state college. He is not going to cancel student debt. He is going to try and cut Social Security and Medicare. He is not going to close Guantanamo. He is not going to recall the tax breaks for the wealthy in the last tax refunds that were given. 85% of those tax breaks actually went to the 1%, but, excuse me, by the way. And they are not going, let me look at the list here. They're not going to pardon Assange and Snowden. They are not going to cut the military budget. They are going to increase it. They are going to go into they're going to go into Syria. They are probably going to attack Iran. They are probably going to go into Venezuela. The Democratic Party is more of a war hawk party than the Republicans are now. And the only reason for that is the Republicans don't want to spend any money on it. They don't give a damn about killing people and committing war crimes. They don't care about that. What they are worried is about the deficit. Well, our deficit is already $24 trillion. And the reason for that is not welfare and food stamps and schools and hospitals. That's not the reason. And it's not because of Social Security and Medicare. It is because of the wars and the bank bailouts and throwing tons of money at the stock market and the trillions of dollars that we have wasted in the Middle East and the money that goes to the military-industrial complex and the military budget. That is what has caused the deficits. But how they want to cure the deficits? They don't want to get rid of the things that have caused it. What they want to do is they want to cut welfare and cut food stamps, cut social programs, cut Social Security, cut back Medicare. They want to cut all of the things that the working class, that the 95% of us need. They are cutting infrastructure. And where is that money going? It is going into the pockets of the 1% and going into the pockets of the donor class. The people that live in Martha's Vineyard, the people that Biden and Nancy Pelosi hang out with and Chuck Schumer hang out with, those at the cocktail parties and the golf courses, that's who they hang out with. That's who's getting the benefits. The working class and the poor are getting screwed. They haven't come up with a way of subsidizing the unemployment. You cannot live on unemployment. We have over 27 million people unemployed right now. Now they're making, states are laying off government workers. We are in a complete disaster, and Congress is at a stalemate because they can't agree on how to take care of the unemployed. They spent $4 trillion when COVID first hit. The stock market crashed majorly. What did they do? They have a thing called the Plunge Protection Unit. It is part of the Federal Reserve. And what they do is if the stock market starts to crash, they start pumping money into the stock market, buying up stocks, buying up stock. What happened with the $1.2 trillion tax cut? That money that went all to 85% of it, remember, went to the 1%. What did they do with that money? They did not put it back into the economy. What they did was they bought back their stock so that they could increase their portfolios, so that they could enrich themselves. And there was no controls over that money. Exactly the same thing is going on now. How many trillions of dollars has the government thrown at the rich again? Bailing out corporations, bailing out cruise lines, bailing out the airline industry, bailing out these industries, and they're going to go ahead and lay off their employees anyway. That was supposedly the deal, was they would get this money as long as they didn't lay off anyone. But they're still laying off everybody anyway. They don't give a shit because they know nothing's going to happen to them. No one's going to jail. You can be a war criminal and you can fly around in your Learjet and have book deals and walk free in society. But if you shoplift from a store, you can go to jail. If you smoke pot, you might go to jail. It's completely upside down. The Wall Street wrecked the middle class. It wrecked millions of lives. Not a single one of those bankers went to jail. Not one. They committed crimes and they committed fraud and nothing happened. And that's Biden. That's what you're going to get. We already know. We know what Trump is. We know what Biden is. So how is this a democracy when we have two parties to pick from and both parties are corrupt, both parties are in the pocket of the 1%? How are we getting democracy? How is it? Explain it to me. Because I don't see it. All I see is platitudes and virtue signaling and Nancy Pelosi ripping up Trump's speech at the State of the Union address. But what they did was they gave a standing ovation to Juan Guaido, the guy that they're trying to put in as president in this Venezuela, and overthrow the duly elected president, which is Maduro. That is a crime. You cannot put a person in power and throw out a president. But we've been doing that for years. Chile, Nicaragua, Guatemala, San Salvador. I mean, you name it. Panama, Iraq. Well, look what we're doing to Iran with the sanctions. Look what we're doing to Venezuela with the sanctions. Libya, another perfect example. Muammar Gaddafi signed a nuclear agreement that they would cancel their nuclear research programs and would be given as long as they were monitored, they would not be attacked and not be invaded. Well, as soon as he did that, what do? Boom, invade him, destroyed the country, completely wrecked it, handed it off to Al-Qaeda. Now you have open slave markets and mayhem and death in that country to get one guy. Same thing in Iraq. You should see that country completely leveled. No telling how many people actually died. You've got your refugees from Syria and from Lebanon and from Libya and from these countries. We have created a human disaster. That's the American empire, and it is not dead. It needs to be killed, but it's not dead yet. The only way that you're going to stop this nightmare is not voting for Biden and not voting for Trump. What makes me sick is when I say I'm not voting for Biden. Well, they say, well, that's a vote for Trump then. Well, if I say, well, I'm not voting for Trump, is that a vote for Biden? Nobody says that. So what are we going to do about this situation? Because we have a nightmare on our hands, and when you have 27 million people that are going to be evicted after January, remember, they extended the moratorium on evictions till after the election, which was politically smart because you don't want millions of homeless people looting and burning right before an election. Oh, we can't have that. Let's wait till after the election for that nightmare. Then we can bring in the military and crush it. And that's going to happen under Biden or Trump. So it doesn't matter. I'm going to probably write in Bernie Sanders. I might even write in my own name. It doesn't matter. Because whoever you vote for is not going to fix the problem. They're only going to make it worse. Because we know from the history of what they've done in the past is what they're going to do now. And Bernie Sanders, he got screwed by the DNC, and what did he do? Go running, sucking up to the DNC and Nancy Pelosi and Biden. Can I have a few scraps? What did they do? They made these task forces to try and figure out, how do we solve these problems? Well, we know the problems that we have. We know how to solve them. We already have the policies in place. So why have a task force? It's called window dressing. It's called virtue signaling. It's to make the progressives think that something's going to happen. But they've all jumped on board to vote for Biden. What you do if you want progressive policies to be implemented is that you don't vote for Biden. You hold back your vote and say, we're not voting for you unless you give us what the population needs. That's how it works. But they know that the liberals and the progressives, they say, have nowhere to go, so we don't need to listen to them. We need to go after Republicans. So that's what you've got. You have got corruption. You have got a terrible situation in the Middle East. We are blowing trillions of dollars. And where is that going? That's going to the 1%. It's going to the banks. It's going to the oil companies. It's going to the military-industrial complex. And that brings us to another point. Trump said something very interesting a couple of days ago. He said that he wants to get us out of Afghanistan and Syria. But the military-industrial complex won't let him. And he said, like Eisenhower said, is that the military-industrial complex is very powerful in this country. And as soon as he started talking about withdrawing troops, what did they do? They went running to their congressmen and their senators complaining that, oh my God, he's going to get us out of the wars, and what are we going to do about all these huge, massive trillion-dollar profits that we're making now? And he said that that's what is going on. That's why we're in the wars, is for the trillions of dollars that the military-industrial complex are making. To make bombs, to make the aircraft carriers, and now we're working on new nuclear weapons. We're working on what's called mini nukes. Why are we working on mini nukes? Because they're more likely that they can be used. United States, remember, United States is the only nation that ever dropped a nuclear weapon on anyone. The Russians are scared shitless. The Chinese are scared shitless. Europe is scared shitless. The Middle East already knows what's going on. And we are letting pedophiles like Jeff Epstein and the CIA and the Mossad running a pedophile ring, and we're letting them go off scot-free. What has happened to this country? What has happened to this nation? What is going on with our government? This has got to end. We need to get this third party going with Nick Brana and Nina Turner and Marianne Williamson. We have got a lot of progressives that are going to jump ship from the Democratic Party. We need to get this third party going. We need to start running progressive candidates. We need to start primarying people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and McConnell. We need to get rid of this dead wood, these corrupt millionaires that are running the government, running it into the ground, sucking up to their donors. That's what needs to happen. And by voting for Biden, what you're going to do is you're going to cement our future into a complete disaster and going into hell. That's what's going to happen. Because we know what Biden is going to do. So if you vote for him and say, well, we have to get rid of Trump. Why are we getting rid of Trump? You say he is the most dangerous president ever, but when he asked for $700 billion military budget, what did the Democrats do? They gave him $83 billion more than he had asked for. Now, if he was so dangerous and a fascist, why is the Democratic Party giving him more money than he's asked for? Why is that? Because they are all tied into the military-industrial complex, that they are getting money, their donor class, and that is what's going on. It's called corruption. It is called a giant scam. It is called the middle class being crushed. It is called going into feudalism, because right now we are in a fascist state. We are just not getting rounded up yet. But that's coming, because you've got Julian Assange and Snowden. Julian Assange in jail and Snowden in hiding, because they uncovered war crimes, torture, they uncovered the corruption in the military, they uncovered what was going on, and what did we do? We went after the messenger. We put the messenger in jail. We chased Snowden over to the Russian airport, Isn't that interesting? The Russians are supposed to be this evil population that's wanting to kill us and destroy us, and they're communists and all this other stuff. The Soviet Union was never a communist country. It was a capitalist country with socialist regulations. Some of the stuff they did wasn't any good. It was dumb. It didn't solve problems. It made things worse. But they always had private property. Okay? They always had private companies. They came in and tried to direct things a certain way. Exactly the same thing with the Chinese right now. The Chinese government is not a communist government. It is a capitalist system with socialist restraints. That is why the Chinese government, the Chinese GDP is growing 3 times faster than the United States, is because they are taking money and putting it in places where it needs to go. Infrastructure, high-speed rail, higher wages, better factories. They are working on robotics and artificial intelligence. They are creating a society that has some problems. But if you want to say that we are better than China and we are better than Russia, who has the highest per capita population in prison? We have only 5% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the prison population in this country. People like Assange, drug users. You've got cartels going on because of the drug war. We have created a nightmare scenario. We are throwing the middle class and the poor under the bus. We are going into hell, and we have got these idiots at the Democratic National Committee pushing these platitudes about how we are not as bad as Trump and we need to get Biden in, so that these scumbags can go running over to the corporate trough and make themselves more rich. Just wait and see what happens. It doesn't matter who gets elected. We are headed for catastrophe. I am not voting for either one of these parties. I am not doing it. And if there was a third party right now that was viable, we would win. Because people are sick of this. They know what they're getting. Then once again, they think they have to choose between the lesser of two evils. That's what they think. That's called democracy? And we're already in a fascist state because corporations run the government. Fascism is not the government running the corporations. It's the other way around. Corporations running the government. That's what you've got right now. They write the tax policy. They write the policies of what's going to get cut. They write the laws about who's going to get bailed out and who isn't. So think about that. Think about that, my friends, before you vote. Because we have a serious situation on our hands. And when this election is over, whoever wins, when that moratorium gets lifted, look out, because you're going to have millions of people in the streets, foreclosed homes, bought up by the banks. Once again, this is going to be a repeat of 2008, but much worse. You've got 40% of all businesses in this country are going to be permanently closed. That's it. Meanwhile, you got Jeff Bezos worth $200 billion. Elon Musk, these guys are walking away with trillions of dollars that are being looted from the taxpayers because they're taking all the money out of the system and enriching themselves and paying very little taxes. That's what's wrecking this country. So if we're not going to stop that, nothing's going to change. And if you commit to voting for Biden without demanding anything in return, then you're not going to get anything. I can guarantee it. So let's see how this turns out. I can tell you how it's going to turn out. It's going to turn out into chaos. You're going to have blood in the streets. We're going to have a revolution in this country next year. I'm telling you, unless something changes fundamentally. But Biden, with his own words, said nothing fundamentally is going to change. so we know. So I hope everybody has a good night. It's going to be tough. You're going to probably have a hard time sleeping tonight. But that's the reality of it. So I bid you all good night. Let's see what happens next week. All right, take care. This is Terry Allen, Radical Progressive. Subscribe. Send me a comment. I'll read every one of them. Let's see where this goes. All right, take care. Good night.